What the hell? He just kissed her? Dwayne Ellington's voice sliced through the polished hallway like a crack of lightning. His tone, usually cool, calculated, measured, shook with something raw. Shock. Disbelief. Maybe even fear. But that moment, that impossible moment, came after everything Aaliyah Johnson had already endured that morning. It began 3 hours earlier. Aaliyah had arrived before dawn, as she always did, wearing her gray janitorial uniform and clutching a thermos of cheap coffee that tasted more like metal than caffeine. Her breath fogged in the frigid air as she swiped her badge and entered the private service elevator of Ellington Capital. Dolores, the housekeeper who had worked for the Ellington family for nearly 20 years, was already waiting at the penthouse level. Her back was ramrod straight, her eyes cold and appraising. "You're late," Dolores snapped. Aaliyah glanced at her watch. "It's 5:59, ma'am. My shift starts at 6. Don't talk back." Dolores shoved a bundle of cleaning cloths into her arms. "Mr. Ellington wants the marble buffed before the nanny arrives at 8, and all 3 guest rooms polished, and the laundry, and you'll be preparing the nursery for inspection." Aaliyah blinked. "Ma'am, that's usually split between 3 people, and..." Dolores stepped closer, her perfume sharp and oppressive. "Are you questioning my orders?" she hissed. "I'm just saying it might not be possible to finish before." Slap! The sound cracked through the hallway. Aaliyah stumbled, the sting exploding across her cheek, knees buckling as she hit the floor. "You people never listen," Dolores spat. "Be grateful you even have this job. Now get up." Aaliyah lifted trembling fingers to her cheek, her breath shuddering. I didn't mean disrespect, ma'am." "Then stop talking and start scrubbing." Dolores turned sharply, heels clacking across the marble as she walked away. Aaliyah swallowed hard, then pushed herself up using the wall for support. Her cheek throbbed, her pride stung even worse. But she forced herself to stand straight. She needed this job for Maya, for rent, for survival. So she worked, and worked, and worked. By 8, sweat darkened her uniform. Her arms ached, her knees felt like gravel from kneeling on the marble. Yet Dolores kept piling tasks onto her, criticizing every breath she took. But none of that, not the humiliation, not the slap, not the exhaustion prepared her for the chaos she would witness next. Screaming erupted from the nursery. Not just screaming, shrieking, high-pitched and furious. Aaliyah froze at the top of the stairs. 2 women in glossy uniforms stood outside the nursery, both with their hair yanked loose, both wiping spit from their faces. "He spat on me," one cried. "He spat right in my eyes, and he bit me," the other sobbed. Inside the room, a toddler's wail echoed like a storm. A tiny boy, Trey Ellington, thrashed wildly, his face blotchy and red, fists tight, mouth open in a violent cry. One nanny tried to approach him. He spat at her too. Aaliyah's breath caught. She glanced around. Dolores was nowhere in sight. The nannies were retreating. No one dared step forward. Her cheek still burning from the earlier slap, Aaliyah gripped her cleaning cloth and took a shaky step toward the room. "Miss, don't," one nanny cried. "He hates everyone." But Aaliyah didn't stop. She knew that kind of cry. The kind born not just from anger, but from hurt. She stepped inside the nursery. The smell of baby lotion mixed with panic. Toys were scattered everywhere, blocks, picture books, a stuffed lion turned upside down. The walls were a gentle sky blue, but the air felt electric. Trey spotted her, his eyes wide, wet, furious, locked on her brown face, her plain uniform, her trembling hands. Aaliyah knelt slowly. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay, sweetheart." He screamed louder. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and began humming, soft, gentle, steady. A hymn her grandmother used to sing on long church nights in Georgia. A song older than her pain, older than the walls around her. And then, the impossible happened. Trey stopped screaming. His fists loosened. His tiny chest heaved, then steadied. His face softened as if the melody wrapped around him like warm cotton. He took one step, then another. The boy who had spat at every nanny walked straight toward her, lifted his trembling hands, and pressed his cheek to hers. Aaliyah's breath vanished. Her eyes burned. Her cheek, the one that had been slapped not even an hour earlier, felt something entirely different now. A small, innocent kiss. The doorway filled with stunned faces. 2 nannies, a security guard, a junior staffer holding a clipboard mid-air. And then, what the hell? He just kissed her? The deep voice behind them parted the crowd like a wave. Dwayne Ellington entered the room, tall, sharp, impossibly composed except for the shock widening his usually controlled blue eyes. He took in the scene, jaw tightening, not with anger, with something deeper. Something cracked open. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Aaliyah rose to her feet, still holding Trey, who refused to let go. "Aaliyah Johnson, sir," she whispered. "I'm the cleaning staff." Trey buried his face in her shoulder. The room held its breath. Dwayne stepped closer. "He's never done that before. Never. He hasn't let anyone touch him since." His voice broke. Just a little. Dolores appeared behind him, pale. She opened her mouth as if to twist the story, to reclaim control, but Dwayne lifted a hand. "Enough. Everyone out." The room emptied. Only he, Aaliyah, and Trey remained. For a long time, Dwayne stared first at Trey, then at the woman holding him, and something changed in his expression. Something unspoken, but unmistakably human. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Miss Johnson," he said, "I'd like to talk to you." Aaliyah's heart thudded, her cheek still stinging from earlier, the weight of Trey warm against her skin. This wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of something that none of them, especially her, could have seen coming. If this moment touched your heart, like the video and comment where you're watching from, maybe someone near you is watching too. The silence in the nursery was heavy, sacred even. Aaliyah stood still, arms gently wrapped around Trey, whose tiny fingers clutched her shirt as if she were the last safe place on earth. Dwayne Ellington hadn't moved. He leaned one hand against the edge of the changing table, his eyes flicking between his son and the woman who had somehow done what no expert, no therapist, and no nanny could do: calm the storm in Trey's heart. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment but not its weight. "Let's talk, outside." "Oh, go." Aaliyah nodded silently and followed him out into the hallway. Dolores was waiting near the grand staircase, her face still tense, watching every move like a hawk guarding its nest. She didn't say a word, but Aaliyah felt the sting of her glare sharp as the slap that still echoed on her cheek. Dolores knew something had changed, and she didn't like it. In the sitting room just past the kitchen, Dwayne gestured toward a leather armchair. "Please, sit." "It is." Aaliyah hesitated, glancing down at her worn cleaning shoes against the spotless hardwood floors. She didn't belong in spaces like this, rooms where the furniture cost more than her rent for a year. But she sat, careful to rest only on the edge. Dwayne remained standing. "I know this is unorthodox, and you probably didn't plan for any of this." "No, sir," she said quietly. "I came to mop floors." He gave a short laugh, but it wasn't mocking, just weary. "And somehow, you walked right through every wall my son's built since his mother died." Aaliyah lowered her eyes. "I didn't mean to interfere. I just heard him crying, and something in me couldn't walk away." "I'm glad you didn't," he said. Then after a beat, "He doesn't let anyone touch him. Not since the accident." Her eyes rose gently. "The accident?" He nodded, jaw tightening. "Last winter, my wife, Helena, was driving Trey to a routine checkup. It was snowing, black ice, the kind you don't see until it's too late." His voice thinned. "She didn't make it." "I'm sorry," Aaliyah whispered, sincere. He gave a stiff nod. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence heavy with stories unspoken. "Finally," he said, "I'd like to offer you a temporary role as Trey's live-in nanny." Aaliyah blinked. "Sir, I'm not qualified. I've never worked full-time with children. I don't have a license or certifications. I don't need a resume. I need results. And you're the only one who's gotten any. But what about your staff? The housekeeper?" "I'll handle Dolores." He cut in. "If she's made things difficult, it ends now." Aaliyah hesitated. Her cheek still carried the sting, the invisible bruise deeper than the skin. "With all due respect, sir, People like me don't just get offered jobs like this. Not in buildings like this. Not in penthouses that stretch into the sky. He folded his arms. Why not? She looked up, quietly but firmly. Because we're not supposed to be seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stepped closer, his voice steady. Trey sees you. That's enough for me. The words hit her like a slow dawn. A warmth she hadn't expected. A space she didn't know she was allowed to enter. She nodded, still cautious. Okay, I'll try. I'll have Dolores prepare the guest room next to Trey's nursery, starting tonight. Yes. She stood, unsure of the proper etiquette. Should she shake his hand? Bow? Salute? She opted for a respectful nod, then turned to leave. As she reached the hallway, she nearly collided with Dolores, who was clearly eavesdropping from behind the wall. Watch yourself, the older woman muttered low, venom coiled in her voice. Don't start thinking you're anything more than what you are. Aaliyah didn't reply, not because she agreed but because Trey's soft voice behind her suddenly called out, Mama. Both women froze. Aaliyah turned. Trey stood in the nursery doorway, holding his stuffed lion, looking sleepy but determined. Dwayne appeared behind him, stunned. Did he just? Aaliyah stepped forward gently. No, baby, she said softly, kneeling. I'm Aaliyah. I'm just here to help. But Trey shook his head stubbornly and ran to her. Dolores's face was unreadable. Dwayne, however, looked like something had shifted inside him. Later that night, Aaliyah packed the few things she owned, a small suitcase with worn zippers and a framed photo of her parents holding baby Maya in a hospital room. She kissed her sister's forehead, whispered promises about sending money for groceries and rent, then took the long train ride back to Manhattan. When she returned to the penthouse, Dolores showed her the guest room. The sheets were stiff. The window looked out onto the skyline, but the view felt lonely. Aaliyah didn't complain. She unpacked, put the photo on the bedside table, and sat for a moment, letting the day settle over her like a coat she wasn't sure how to wear. Down the hall, Trey giggled. She heard it faintly, an echo of joy that had no business existing in a house that had been silent for so long. She stood and walked to the doorway of his room. Dwayne was reading him a story, but Trey kept peeking toward the door. Aaliyah smiled. Maybe, just maybe, the walls weren't so high after all. The guest room was quiet. Almost too quiet. Aaliyah lay on the edge of the bed, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. The sheets smelled of starch and something faintly citrusy. Nothing like home. A small nightlight glowed in the corner, casting soft shapes across the wall, and the distant hum of Manhattan buzzed just beyond the thick glass window. She couldn't sleep. Not because she wasn't tired, her muscles ached from cleaning, and her mind reeled from the weight of the day, but because something inside her refused to believe it was real. That she was here. That the son of a billionaire had chosen her, of all people, to calm his heart. And that someone, Dwayne Ellington, had offered her a role in his world, if only temporarily. She shifted slightly and turned to the nightstand. The photo of her parents and baby Maya smiled back at her. Her mother's eyes were soft, her father's hands large but tender. They were the kind of people who believed in doing right, even when it cost everything. She missed them deeply. She whispered, I hope I'm doing something good. Just then, a soft thump echoed from the hallway. She sat up, listening. Another thump, then a shuffle. She stood, slid her feet into the house, slippers left for her, and crept into the hallway. The nursery door was ajar. Inside, Trey stood barefoot, half awake, tears staining his cheeks, holding his stuffed lion by one leg. Sweetheart? She whispered. He looked up, lip trembling. Mama, he whimpered again. Her heart twisted. She walked slowly into the room and knelt beside him. It's okay, she said, brushing back a curl from his forehead. You're safe. I'm here. He reached out and clutched her hand tightly. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers with desperation that went deeper than any tantrum. It was grief, confusion, a longing for comfort. She glanced at the crib. You want me to stay until you fall asleep? He didn't answer, just pulled her toward the crib. She sighed softly, then sat down on the nursery chair beside it and began to hum the same melody she'd sung that morning. Low, soft, almost like a prayer. Trey climbed into the crib on his own, laid down, still gripping her fingers through the slats. Within minutes, his breath slowed. His chest rose and fell in a gentle rhythm. As she hummed, her eyes grew heavy too, and for a moment, her cheek rested on the rail of the crib. She didn't mean to drift, but the calmness of the room, the warmth of the little hand in hers, it was too much peace to resist. She dozed there, half sitting. Her body slumped awkwardly, but her heart finally still. That's how Dwayne found them. He had returned from a late-night conference call in his home office. His tie loosened, the collar of his dress shirt slightly wrinkled. He had gone to check on Trey, as he always did before going to bed, but this time, he paused in the doorway. The light from the hallway fell softly across the scene, his son asleep, fingers entwined with the young woman slumped beside him. Aaliyah's braid had slipped over her shoulder, her face serene even in sleep. She looked peaceful, present, real. Dwayne's throat tightened. It had been so long since the house held this kind of stillness. Not silence, he had plenty of that, but real stillness. The kind that came when a child felt safe, when someone cared not out of obligation, but out of instinct. He walked away without a sound. The next morning, Aaliyah woke with a stiff neck and a soft blanket draped over her shoulders. She blinked, realizing she was no longer in the chair. She had been moved gently, carefully to the small couch in the corner of the nursery. Someone had given her a pillow. The blanket smelled faintly of cedar and something distinctly masculine. She sat up, startled, just as Dolores walked in carrying a breakfast tray. "Well, look who made herself at home," Dolores said, her tone sharp but edged with something else, uncertainty. Aaliyah sat up straighter. I didn't mean to fall asleep in here. Doesn't matter now," Dolores muttered. She placed the tray on the dresser. "Scrambled eggs, toast, fruit." Mr. Ellington said, "You're to be given meals, fresh, in your room, 3 times a day." Aaliyah's eyebrows rose. "He said that?" Dolores didn't answer, only gave a curt nod and walked out, her shoes clicking down the hall. Aaliyah glanced at the tray. She couldn't remember the last time someone made breakfast for her. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. As she finished the last of the orange slices, a knock came at the door. Trey stood there in his tiny pajamas, holding his lion upside down again. "Hi," Aaliyah said, smiling. He waddled in, and without hesitation, climbed onto the couch and into her lap. Dwayne appeared moments later, coffee mug in hand. He leaned against the doorframe, watching the two of them. "I hope the accommodations were okay," he said lightly. She smiled, gently stroking Trey's back. "They were more than okay. Dolores said you slept in the nursery. I didn't plan to. He needed someone, and you were there," he said quietly. Aaliyah nodded. He sipped his coffee, watching Trey nestle into her side. "This house," he said, "hasn't had laughter in a long time." She looked up, her voice soft. "Sometimes it just needs a little lullaby." Dwayne stared at her for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he nodded. "Finish your breakfast. I'll have the driver take you and Trey to Central Park later. He needs the fresh air." She blinked. "You're trusting me already?" He gave a faint smile. "He already has." And with that, he walked away. Central Park in February was no place for laughter. The trees were bare, their branches stretching toward a colorless sky, and the wind sliced through scarves and wool coats like glass. Still, there was something oddly comforting in the stillness, the kind of quiet that reminded Aaliyah of Sunday mornings back home, when the world paused just long enough for people to breathe. The Ellington car, a sleek black Range Rover, waited by the south entrance. A driver opened the door for her as if she'd always belonged in the back seat of a billionaire's vehicle. Not behind a mop, Trey sat beside her in a navy puffer jacket and beanie, a tiny bundle of curiosity. His lion toy rested in his lap. He said nothing but looked out the window the entire ride, eyes wide as the city passed by. When they reached the park, the driver nodded politely. "I'll be nearby if you need anything, ma'am." She blinked. "Oh, thank you." It still felt strange being called ma'am, being chauffeured like someone important. But Trey tugged at her coat, drawing her attention back to what mattered. They stepped out together, his little hand in hers, his pace cautious but eager. For almost an hour, they walked along the frozen lake. watched ducks paddle through slush, and stopped for hot chocolate from a vendor whose breath fogged with every sentence. Trey didn't speak, but his hand never left hers. And then, the air changed. A black town car pulled up along the curb. The kind of car that whispered money without needing to shout. A woman stepped out, dressed in a long gray coat and leather gloves, sunglasses perched high despite the lack of sun. Aaliyah recognized her instantly from the framed photo in Trey's nursery. Victoria Hale, Helena's older sister. Trey stiffened. Aaliyah instinctively tightened her grip on his hand. "Well," Victoria said, her voice smooth as glass but twice as sharp. "So you're the one." Aaliyah straightened. "I'm sorry?" Victoria removed her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were blue, cold, and thoroughly unimpressed. "The maid who sings lullabies." "I'm Trey's temporary nanny," Aaliyah said calmly. Victoria gave a dry laugh. "Of course you are. And I'm the Queen of England." Aaliyah glanced down at Trey, who had pressed himself into her side. "You're scaring him." I'm his aunt," Victoria snapped. "He's family." "Then maybe don't talk like a stranger." The words were out before Aaliyah could catch them. Too blunt. Too honest. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose it's easy to speak freely when you're sleeping in penthouses and being fed by silver spoons you didn't earn." Aaliyah kept her tone even. "I never asked for any of this. I'm just here to care for him." "Right," Victoria said, tilting her head. "And I'm sure the extra zeros on your paycheck mean nothing to you." "I haven't been paid anything yet." That made Victoria pause just for a second. Then she stepped closer. "Listen, little girl," she said, lowering her voice. "I see through your game. I've seen your type before. You worm your way into the lives of lonely men and traumatized children, pretending to help. But it's always about one thing. Access." Aaliyah's spine straightened. "I didn't come here for access. I came to clean. Trey found me." Victoria sneered. "How convenient." She leaned down, brushing a finger across Trey's coat like it belonged to her. "I'll be watching," she whispered. Trey pulled back instinctively, burying his face in Aaliyah's coat. That was enough. Aaliyah turned, clutching the boy close, and walked away without another word. Her boots crunched over the icy path. Her hands shook not with fear, but anger. Righteous, protective, pulsing anger. The driver opened the car door when he saw her coming. "Back to the house, ma'am?" "Yes," she said curtly. Now, Trey didn't let go of her for the entire ride home. That evening, Aaliyah found herself in the kitchen, making a small bowl of oatmeal with honey and cinnamon. It was something Maya had always liked when she had trouble sleeping, a ritual of sorts, comfort food with a memory attached. Trey sat at the table in his pajamas, cheeks still pink from the wind. He wasn't crying, but he hadn't smiled either, not since Victoria. As Aaliyah stirred the oats on the stove, she heard footsteps behind her. Dwayne entered, his shirt sleeves rolled, no tie, hair slightly tousled. He looked tired, but his eyes sharpened when they landed on Trey. "Dolores said you ran into Victoria today," he said quietly. Aaliyah didn't turn. "Yes, sir. And how did it go?" "She's concerned," Aaliyah said, keeping her tone neutral. "But I'm not sure her concern is really about Trey." Dwayne sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Victoria's always been intense, controlling." "She scared him," Aaliyah said. He looked over at his son, quiet now, curled in the chair with his lion in one hand, a spoon in the other. "I'll talk to her." "She won't listen," Aaliyah said. "She doesn't see Trey. She sees a legacy, an asset, something to protect, not someone to love." He turned sharply toward her. "You're very direct." "Ope." She met his gaze. "So are you." A beat passed. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. He didn't cry once today. That's the longest he's gone without a tantrum since. He stopped. Since Helena. Aaliyah walked over and placed the bowl of oatmeal in front of Trey. The boy dug in without hesitation. She turned back to Dwayne. "He doesn't need perfection," she said softly. "He just needs presence." He studied her for a long moment. "I'd like you to stay on," he said. "Not just temporarily. As long as Trey wants you here." "I'll stay," she said quietly. "As long as he needs me." Dwayne nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought. Victoria won't be a problem. But Aaliyah didn't believe that, because people like Victoria didn't disappear. They circled, they plotted, and they waited. The next morning began with the hush of a sleeping city, and the faintest glow of sun creeping through sheer white curtains. Aaliyah stirred from her sleep in the guest room, surprised by how well she had rested. For the first time in months, she hadn't dreamt of being chased by overdue bills, or of Maya calling out for help, or of herself scrubbing floors into the early hours. It was quiet, safe. She sat up, brushed her hair back, and padded across the room to open the window just a crack. Cold air filtered in, along with the soft sounds of a city beginning to stretch awake horns, distant footsteps, and the whoosh of cabs below. She turned and caught her reflection in the glass. She looked different, still her, but steadier, more grounded. After a quick shower, she dressed in a warm, casual sweater and jeans clothes. Dolores had reluctantly pulled from storage and left neatly folded at her door, without a note. Aaliyah appreciated the gesture, even if it came wrapped in ice. When she walked into the kitchen, Trey was already seated at the island, a sippy cup in hand, watching a squirrel through the glass wall that faced the garden. Dolores stood at the counter arranging toast like it was an art installation. "Good morning," Aaliyah said softly. Dolores didn't turn. "The child woke up at 6. He was asking for you." Trey turned, smiled, and reached for her. Aaliyah walked over and scooped him into her arms. "Hey there, sunshine." Dolores sniffed. "He refused breakfast until I played your singing from the monitor." Aaliyah blinked. "What monitor?" "The baby monitor," Dolores said, finally turning. "Mr. Ellington had it installed when he first moved in. Said it helped him sleep." Hearing Trey breathe, her eyes narrowed. "Now he listens to you, too." Aaliyah didn't answer. She turned her attention to Trey, who nestled against her shoulder like it was the most natural place in the world. Breakfast was easy. Warm oatmeal, berries, soft pancakes. Aaliyah fed Trey slowly, chatting softly to him about the day ahead. Maybe a walk in the garden, a drawing session in the sunroom, or baking cookies together. He didn't speak, but his fingers played with the edge of her sleeve the whole time. Later, while Dolores cleaned the kitchen, Aaliyah and Trey settled on the floor of the nursery with crayons and thick white paper. Trey drew circles, crooked and scattered, each one more confident than the last. Aaliyah sat beside him, humming a soft gospel tune under her breath. That's when she noticed it, an old frame tucked between books on the bottom shelf. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a photo. Helena Ellington, young, vibrant, laughing, holding baby Trey in her lap, her hair golden, caught in motion by the wind. She looked straight at the camera, full of life. Aaliyah's throat tightened. Trey reached for the frame. "Mama," the word was clear, soft, but unmistakable. Aaliyah looked up. "Trey? Did you just?" He touched the glass. His finger traced his mother's face. Aaliyah placed the photo in his lap gently. "She loved you very much, didn't she?" Trey looked up, eyes shimmering. Then he did something unexpected. He stood, shuffled over to his crib, and pulled out the lion toy. He brought it back and placed it next to the photo. Like an offering, Aaliyah felt a lump rise in her throat. She wiped her eyes just as a shadow passed by the open nursery door. Dwayne. He had been standing there, unseen, for who knew how long. He stepped inside, his voice hushed. "I forgot that picture was still here. I found it on the shelf," Aaliyah said softly. Trey called her Mama. Dwayne's jaw clenched. He hasn't said that word since the funeral. There was silence between them. "I'm sorry," Aaliyah said. "If this upset him—" "No," Dwayne interrupted, gently. "It didn't. He needs to remember her. I do too." She looked at him then, not as a billionaire, not as her employer, but as a man. One who was trying to raise a child while shouldering the grief of a home that used to be full. A man who still slept with ghosts in the hallway. "You loved her," Aaliyah said. "Not a question." "Deeply," he said. "And I failed her." Aaliyah shook her head. "You didn't fail anyone. You're still here. Still trying. That counts more than you think." He met her eyes. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Trey broke the silence by crawling into her lap again. Dwayne watched the scene with a softness Aaliyah hadn't seen in him before. "He's different with you. I don't know why," she said honestly. "I didn't do anything special. You listened," he said. "That's more than most people ever do." That afternoon, the mood in the house lifted slightly. Trey giggled as Aaliyah chased him through the hallway on all fours, pretending to be a lion. Dolores watched with pursed lips, pretending to be annoyed, but Aaliyah swore she saw a ghost of a smile. Dwayne even joined them for dinner. It wasn't formal. No suits. No speeches. Just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans served family style on the kitchen island. Trey sat beside Aaliyah, eating carefully, even offering her a piece of his biscuit. Dwayne sipped wine slowly. "This feels normal," he said. "It is," Aaliyah said. "Or maybe it's what normal is supposed to feel like." He smiled faintly, nodding. After Trey was asleep, Aaliyah passed by the study. Dwayne sat behind his desk, typing slowly on his laptop. She knocked gently. "Hey," she said. "He's down for the night." He looked up. "Thank you, Aaliyah." "For what?" "For giving my son a reason to smile again." She swallowed. "He's giving me something too." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "A place to belong." And with that, she left him there alone with his thoughts and a flicker of something new taking root in the corners of his grief. The sun rose reluctantly the next morning, its pale light barely cutting through the fog that blanketed the upper levels of the Ellington Tower. The skyline beyond the windows looked like a city half asleep, suspended in gray. Inside the penthouse, however, warmth bloomed through the scent of coffee, the sizzle of bacon, and the soft giggles of a toddler now accustomed to joy. Aaliyah stood in the kitchen barefoot, dressed in a navy sweater and black joggers, flipping pancakes while Trey sat at the island, thumping his lion against the granite countertop like it was a drum. Dolores watched from the corner with arms folded and one skeptical eyebrow permanently raised, but she said nothing. Ever since Dwayne had given Aaliyah full authority with Trey, Dolores's usual biting remarks had turned into measured silence. "Want blueberries in yours?" Aaliyah asked Trey. He nodded eagerly, his curls bouncing, eyes wide with anticipation. "Coming right up." She slid the pancake onto a plate, added a few extra berries, and handed it to him with a smile. He beamed. A knock on the penthouse door shattered the peaceful morning. Dolores turned quickly. "It's too early for guests." "ID to." Aaliyah watched as Dolores crossed the room and opened the door only to freeze in place, her spine going rigid like someone had just ordered her at military attention. Then came the click. Heels. Sharp, designer, unapologetic heels. And the scent, musky floral, expensive, heavy in the air before the woman even spoke. "Good morning," came a cool, clipped voice. "I assume my presence wasn't expected." Deeper vens. Aaliyah stepped around the corner to see Victoria Hale, again in full regalia. Tailored winter white coat, silk scarf knotted precisely, lipstick a deep red that looked more weapon than makeup. She pulled off her gloves one finger at a time and smiled thinly when she spotted Aaliyah. Trey immediately shrank behind Aaliyah's leg. "Aw," Victoria said, eyeing the boy. "Still shy, I see." Aaliyah crouched slightly. "It's okay, baby. We're just going to stay right here, all right?" Dwayne's voice echoed from the hallway. "Victoria." He appeared, barefoot, tie undone, clearly not expecting his sister-in-law before 9 a.m. "To what do we owe the pleasure? I thought I'd stop by." "Unannounced." "Yes, I know. But isn't family always welcome?" Dwayne's jaw tensed. "You've never come unannounced before. What's going on?" Victoria stepped into the penthouse like she owned it, her eyes sweeping over the polished floors, the fresh-cut flowers on the console, the breakfast dishes on the counter, and Aaliyah, especially Aaliyah. "I was reading the Chronicle this morning," she said, casually pulling a folded newspaper from her handbag. "Looked what made page 6. She laid the paper on the counter, a grainy photo taken from a distance. Aaliyah and Trey walking in Central Park, his hand in hers, her smile unmistakable. "New nanny, new love," Victoria quoted the headline aloud. "Ellington spotted with mystery woman and toddler. Insiders question how close is too close." Dwayne's face darkened. "This is trash," Victoria shrugged. "Perception is power, Dwayne." especially when your entire board is watching your every move. You bring this woman into your home, no vetting, no qualifications, and suddenly you're playing happy family in the tabloids? I don't care what the tabloids say. Well, the board does. And if they start to question your judgment? She didn't finish the sentence, but the threat lingered like smoke. Aaliyah didn't move. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she knew this wasn't her moment. This wasn't her battlefield. Victoria turned to her, smile chilling. Would you give us a moment, Miss Johnson? Dwayne opened his mouth to speak, but Aaliyah nodded calmly. Of course. She guided Trey gently down the hallway toward the nursery, feeling his little fingers tighten around hers. I don't like her, he whispered. Aaliyah knelt, surprised. You remember her? He nodded, eyes serious. She makes your voice go quiet. Aaliyah felt a knot in her throat. It's okay, baby. She can't take anything from us. It is Bracked. In the kitchen, Victoria stood facing Dwayne like a prosecutor before the verdict. I'm not here to fight, she said, almost convincingly. I'm here because I care about Trey. You care about appearances, he said bluntly. I care about the family name. About the fact that people are whispering. About what happens when Child Protective Services starts asking questions again. About custody. Dwayne's shoulders stiffened. Don't you dare threaten that. I'm not threatening, she said. I'm warning. Your judgment is clouded, Dwayne. You're not yourself. You're still grieving. And now you've attached yourself to some girl you barely know. I know enough to trust her with my son. You trust her? Victoria laughed bitterly. She was scrubbing your floors 3 days ago, and now she's the only reason Trey is laughing again. Victoria went still. That fact, that undeniable truth, was a crack in her armor. Dwayne's voice lowered. You can posture, and you can posture all you want. But you saw it, Victoria. You saw how he hid behind her. He knows who's safe. Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward the front door, gloves already halfway on. You're letting your emotions run your house, she said. Just don't be surprised when it all comes crashing down. Then she was gone. Aaliyah waited until Trey fell asleep during story time before returning to the kitchen. Dwayne stood at the island, the newspaper still there. I'm sorry, she said gently. He looked up. For what? For all the attention. I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't. He walked around the counter and leaned against the island. You've done nothing but bring peace into this house. That woman brings storm clouds wherever she walks. She won't stop. No, he said. She won't. Aaliyah hesitated. So, what now? He looked at her, and for a moment, the cool billionaire exterior melted away. Now, he said, we hold the line. Snow began to fall that evening. Soft at first, then thicker flakes tumbling through the Manhattan sky like whispers. Aaliyah stood by the tall nursery window, watching the light from the street lamps catch on each drifting flake, while Trey snored gently behind her, curled up with his lion and a navy fleece blanket. She pressed her hand to the cold glass. Victoria's words still echoed in her mind, curling into the corners of her piece like smoke under a door. She makes your voice go quiet, Trey had said. He wasn't wrong. People like Victoria didn't shout. They smothered. With smiles, with status, with threats dressed as warnings. Aaliyah turned away from the window. She'd grown up hearing voices like that. In grocery stores, at school meetings, in job interviews, voices that said, we're not saying you don't belong, we're just saying we already have someone for that spot. She wouldn't let Trey grow up afraid of those voices. Not if she could help it. She slipped out of the nursery and found Dolores in the hallway, muttering to herself while straightening a vase of tulips. Where's Mr. Ellington? Aaliyah asked. In the study, Dolores replied curtly. Where else would he be after being threatened by the ghost of Christmas lawsuits? Aaliyah blinked. Did you just make a joke? Dolores straightened up and gave her a look. Don't get used to it. Aaliyah walked quietly toward the study and knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open slightly. Dwayne sat at his desk. Laptop closed. His tie on the floor. A half-empty glass of scotch in his hand. His shoulders were hunched forward, hands clasped tightly, as if holding something invisible together. You okay? She asked softly. He didn't look up. What do you think? She stepped inside, careful not to intrude, and sat across from him. The fireplace behind him cast a low amber glow, dancing shadows across the room. She's not going away, is she? Aaliyah said. He shook his head. No. Victoria's always been like this. Strategic. Cold. But now she smells blood. She thinks she can use public opinion, the board, and even family court to make a move. Aaliyah leaned forward. You really think she'd try to take custody? She's threatened before. After Helena died. Said I wasn't stable enough. That Trey needed a maternal influence. Aaliyah's lips tightened. And now she sees me as that only, not the kind she can control. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion but sharp with clarity. Exactly. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then Aaliyah asked the question that had been burning in her gut all day. Why are you fighting so hard to keep me here? Dwayne was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, raw. Because Trey chose you. And because I trust you. She swallowed. Even with everything in the papers? He looked at her fully now. Especially then. You haven't asked for anything. You haven't tried to impress me. You didn't even want this job. You just showed up and everything started to get better. His words settled over her like snowfall. Quiet, heavy, real. I can leave, she said, though the words felt like broken glass in her mouth. If it protects Trey, if it makes things easier for you. Dwayne stood, walked around the desk, and leaned against it, arms folded. That's the difference between you and Victoria. She plays chess with people. You protect them. He paused. You're not going anywhere. Just then, the study door opened without a knock. Dolores. She held a white envelope in her hand, her expression tight. This just arrived by courier, from Hale and Thatcher Law Group. Dwayne took it, eyes narrowing. He opened the envelope, pulled out a single page. His jaw clenched. Aaliyah leaned in. What is it? A formal petition, he said, voice dark. Victoria has filed an emergency request for a court hearing. She's challenging my custody of Trey, claiming I've created an unstable environment by allowing an unlicensed, unvetted woman to act as his primary caregiver. He stared at the paper like it might catch fire. Aaliyah went still. That's fast. She doesn't play fair, Dwayne muttered. She plays to win. Aaliyah's hands tightened in her lap. So, what do we do? He looked up at her, something fierce igniting behind his eyes. We prepare. Aye. By the next morning, the penthouse was buzzing. Dwayne's legal team, usually reserved for boardroom deals and investment contracts, now had a war room set up in the formal dining area. Laptops, binders, coffee cups, and calendars filled every inch of the polished mahogany table. Aaliyah kept her distance, caring for Trey while the adults plotted battle. But she overheard the snippets, child psychologist testimony, Victoria's influence on the board, optics, 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 and for God, the word rang in her ears like a siren. Optics. It didn't matter how much Trey laughed with her, or how he ran to her every morning. It only mattered how it looked. Mid-morning, while Dwayne was on a call, Aaliyah pulled Dolores aside in the kitchen. Tell me honestly, she said. Do you think I should go? Dolores, surprised, dropped a spoon into the sink with a clang. You serious? I'm not trying to win anything here. I just want what's best for that boy. Ire. Dolores gave her a long look, then muttered, Sit down. Aaliyah sat. Dolores took a slow breath, something close to vulnerability flickering in her voice. I've worked for this family longer than you've been alive. I held Trey when he was 3 days old. I watched Helena run this house with a voice like honey and a spine of steel, and I watched Dwayne fall apart after the accident. She paused. And I've never not once seen that boy laugh like he does with you. Aaliyah swallowed. So, Dolores said, eyes narrowing. If you even think about walking away, I will personally slap the sense back into you. And this time, it won't be out of spite. It'll be out of love. Aaliyah blinked. You care? Dolores rolled her eyes. Don't get soft on me. Later that evening, Aaliyah sat with Trey in the nursery. He was sleepy but anxious, his little hands fidgeting as she read from a picture book. Tomorrow's a big day, she whispered. But you don't have to worry, okay? You've got an army now. He rested his head on her shoulder. In the doorway, Dwayne stood watching. You ready? He asked softly. Aaliyah looked up, her voice steady. Yes, because when the storm comes, you don't run, you hold the line. The courtroom was colder than Aaliyah had expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Everything about it felt detached, clinical, polished wood floors, gray walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like flies in a jar. It smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and old fear. She sat on the far left bench, hands folded tightly in her lap, dressed in the navy blue suit Dolores had picked out for her, nothing flashy, but firm, respectful, the kind of outfit that said I belong here, even if her shaking knees begged to differ. Trey wasn't with her, of course. He was home with Dolores and a family friend, tucked safely away from the proceedings. But the boy's lion toy rested in her tote bag like a quiet reminder. You're here for him. Across the aisle sat Victoria Hale, spine arrow straight, draped in charcoal gray and pearls, her posture impeccable, her eyes calm and predatory. Her attorney, a silver-haired man named Carlton Grant, stood beside her, flipping through files like this was just another Tuesday. Dwayne sat beside Aaliyah, one hand on his knee, the other gripping a pen. He hadn't spoken much that morning, but his presence was solid, anchoring. Even when the court officer called, "All rise," and the Honorable Judge Gloria Penfield entered, he didn't waver. Judge Penfield was in her 60s, stern-faced, with reading glasses that sat low on her nose and a voice like thunder trapped in velvet. "Be seated," she said, glancing over the courtroom. "Let's proceed." "Aye." Carlton was the first to speak. "Your Honor, we are here today to petition for an emergency custody hearing on behalf of Miss Victoria Hale, the child's maternal aunt. We are deeply concerned about the current emotional and physical environment in which young Trey Ellington is being raised." Aaliyah held her breath. "Mr. Ellington has, in recent weeks, employed a domestic worker with no child care credentials to act as the child's primary caregiver. This woman, with no formal psychological training, no nanny certification, and no background checks conducted through state-approved channels, has been seen escorting the child through public areas of New York City, unaccompanied by any licensed guardian." A low murmur buzzed from the courtroom benches. Carlton paused. "We are not here to disparage Miss Johnson's character, but optics matter, and the safety and mental health of a grieving child are not subjects for experimentation." Dwayne leaned slightly forward. "May I speak, Your Honor?" Judge Penfield nodded. "Proceed." "I am not experimenting," Dwayne said clearly. "I am surviving. And so is my son." He stood now, hands loose at his sides, voice calm but steeled. Trey stopped speaking after Helena's death. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. He rejected every therapist, every nanny until Aaliyah. She was never hired to raise him. She was cleaning floors, and yet, somehow, he chose her. He spoke his first word in nearly a year with her beside him. He paused, then looked at the judge with a quiet intensity. "If loving a child without a license is a crime, then I guess we're all guilty at some point." Carlton rose. "That may be emotionally compelling, but," Judge Penfield held up a hand. "Mr. Grant, I've raised 3 children. I assure you, emotional compelling arguments do matter in cases involving minors." Carlton nodded stiffly and sat. The judge turned to Aaliyah now. "Miss Johnson, please step forward." Aaliyah rose slowly and walked to the center of the room. Her heart pounded in her ears. She looked at the judge, at the seal behind her, at Victoria's cold stare just beyond the bench, and finally at Dwayne, who gave her the faintest of nods. "Miss Johnson," the judge began, "are you currently certified in any form of childcare?" "No, ma'am," Aaliyah replied calmly. "I'm not. Do you have CPR training?" "I do now, Mr. Ellington had me certified last week." "And do you love this child?" The question landed like a thunderclap. Aaliyah blinked, her voice suddenly soft. "Yes, I do. I didn't plan to. I didn't walk into that penthouse looking to be anyone's savior. I came for a job, any job. But Trey found me. He sat beside me when I was scrubbing floors. He cried in my arms before he ever said a word. And now, he sings, he laughs, he sleeps through the night. Her voice broke slightly. I can't explain what we have, but I know I'd protect him with my life. Judge Penfield leaned back. Victoria stood now, rising like a statue. Your Honor, this woman is emotionally entangled. She is blurring the line between employee and family. Aaliyah turned. I am family. The room went silent. Victoria blinked. Aaliyah stepped forward just one pace. Not by blood, but by choice. Isn't that what family should be? The judge raised an eyebrow. Victoria's voice sharpened. And how long do you plan to play house with the Ellingtons? Until you're promoted from nanny to wife? Dwayne stood instantly. That's enough. Judge Penfield banged her gavel once. Order. Victoria sat, her expression unrepentant. The judge turned to Aaliyah again. One final question. Would you continue to care for Trey even if Mr. Ellington no longer employed you? Even if it meant no pay, no security, no guarantee? Aaliyah didn't hesitate. Yes. Wimpy Seekley. The judge stared at her a moment, then looked to her clerk. I'd like a full psychological evaluation for Trey, conducted within 10 business days. I will not issue a change of custody at this time. Carlton started to object, but the judge raised her hand. However, she added, I am ordering a follow-up hearing in 3 weeks, and during that time, Miss Johnson is to remain in the home under observation by a court-appointed child advocate. The 7D duck stub. Aaliyah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. Back at the penthouse, the mood was strange. Not celebratory, not solemn, just quiet. Dwayne poured 2 glasses of wine in the study and handed one to Aaliyah. You were incredible today, he said. I was terrified, she admitted. You didn't look it. They sat by the fire. Aaliyah glanced out the window, where the snow had stopped. The city looked freshly made. She's not done, she said. No, Dwayne agreed. But neither are we. He raised his glass. She met it. To Trey, he said. To holding the line, she added. They clinked glasses in silence, and the war was far from over. 2 days after the courtroom standoff, the penthouse returned to a version of its new normal. Aaliyah's morning started with the soft thud of Trey's footsteps outside her door, followed by his quiet knock, never loud, never demanding, just a gentle tap, like a reminder that she was needed, wanted, and no longer invisible. She'd greet him with a smile, a hug, and his lion toy, then lead him into the kitchen where breakfast routines now included Trey pointing to ingredients, and Aaliyah guessing wrong on purpose just to make him giggle. But even within the warmth of these new rituals, a shadow loomed. The court-appointed child advocate was due any day now. Her name was Margaret Sutter, a former social worker with the city, known for her no-nonsense approach, zero tolerance for manipulation, and a particular sensitivity to cases involving inappropriate boundaries. Translation: she was here to look for mistakes, not to build bridges. That morning, Dolores stood at the foyer mirror adjusting her brooch like she was going to meet royalty. She's punctual, she warned, and she doesn't like clutter or excuses. Kazan. Aaliyah straightened her blouse and gently fixed Trey's collar. So no lion on the dining table? Absolutely not. Trey pouted. Aaliyah knelt and whispered, You can hide him under your chair. I won't tell. He grinned and tucked the plush toy into his hoodie pocket. At exactly 10 a.m., the elevator pinged, and the steel doors parted. Margaret Sutter stepped into the penthouse like a lighthouse cutting through fog. She wore a navy blazer, practical heels, and carried a leather-bound folder under her arm. Her salt and pepper hair was clipped back with ruthless precision. She looked around without smiling. Mr. Ellington, she said, shaking Dwayne's hand firmly. Miss Johnson, please, Dwayne offered, motioning toward the living room. We've prepared some documents. I've read the case file. Margaret interrupted. I'm not here to read. I'm here to observe. Ovary. Her eyes swept over the room, landing on Trey, who sat at the dining table coloring quietly. And there's the little prince. Trey didn't look up. He continued to color in his tiger. Would it be all right if I spent some time with him privately? Margaret asked. Aaliyah opened her mouth, but Dwayne answered first. Only if Miss Johnson is present. That was the judge's ruling. Margaret didn't argue. She simply sat across from Trey and opened her folder. For the next hour, she asked questions. Some were simple, favorite foods, favorite toys. Others more complex. Do you feel safe here, Trey? Do you like Aaliyah? Who tucks you in at night? Trey answered in short phrases, nods, and the occasional whisper. But when Margaret asked, "Do you miss your mommy?" he froze. His crayon rolled from the table and hit the floor with a soft clack. Aaliyah moved instinctively, kneeling beside him. She didn't speak. She just sang soft, slow, the same lullaby she'd sung that first night when he climbed into her lap. Trey leaned into her shoulder. Margaret observed quietly, her pen scribbling across the page. After the session, Margaret thanked them, gave Dolores a few final instructions, and turned to Aaliyah before leaving. "I'll return in 3 days for a second observation. Be consistent," she said. "That's what children trust most." Then she was gone. That night, Aaliyah stood on the balcony, arms wrapped around herself. Snow had melted into slush along the sidewalks below. The city glittered, loud and beautiful, uncaring as ever. Dwayne joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "She didn't seem hostile," he offered. "No," Aaliyah said, but she wasn't impressed either. "We're on trial, and every smile we give is part of the evidence." He sipped quietly. "Do you regret keeping me here?" she asked. Dwayne looked at her sharply. "Not for a second." She nodded but didn't smile. "I've been thinking," she began, then hesitated. "Maybe I should find a way to get certified. Officially. So people stop seeing me as a maid who wandered into the nursery." Dwayne's eyes softened. "You think a certificate would make Victoria respect you?" "No," Aaliyah replied. "But it might make it harder for her to erase me." He was silent for a moment. "I can help. Pay for classes. Anything you need." Aaliyah shook her head. "I want to do this part on my own." He studied her, her jaw set, her eyes fierce despite the chill. Then he nodded. "I respect that." From inside, Trey's laugh rang out. The boy was watching cartoons with Dolores, who was pretending not to enjoy it. Dwayne smiled faintly. "You've built something here," he said. "Something real." Aaliyah looked back through the window. "And something real is always what gets challenged the hardest." "Okay." Later that night, while folding Trey's pajamas, Aaliyah noticed something odd. One of his picture books, The Runaway Bunny, was missing from the shelf. In its place, tucked behind the others, was a flash drive. She froze. It didn't belong to her. She hadn't seen it before. Curious and cautious, she slipped it into her pocket and waited until Trey was asleep to investigate. On her laptop, she inserted the drive. Only one file appeared. A video. She clicked it. Static. Then, Victoria's voice. "You said you wanted proof, Carlton. Here it is." The camera panned over a grainy video feed security footage of Aaliyah in the hallway of the penthouse, late at night. She was singing, holding Trey. Carlton's voice answered off-screen. "That's not enough." Victoria replied, voice colder than ice. "Keep watching." Another clip loaded. This time, it was doctored, heavily. It showed Aaliyah entering Dwayne's bedroom, then fading to black. The implication was clear, and entirely false. Aaliyah's blood ran cold. Victoria wasn't just fighting for custody. She was trying to destroy Aaliyah's credibility, and she had started planting the seeds. The next morning, the air in the penthouse felt different. Not colder, but denser, as if something invisible had slipped in overnight and settled over the walls like fog. Aaliyah moved through the kitchen on autopilot, scrambling eggs, slicing fruit, pouring orange juice. But her thoughts never left the flash drive, burning a hole in her pocket. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Not after watching that doctored footage over and over again. Not after realizing just how far Victoria was willing to go. This isn't about Trey anymore, she thought. It's about humiliation, power, erasure. Trey wandered in, rubbing his eyes, his lion tucked beneath one arm. Aaliyah crouched to hug him, forcing a calm she didn't feel into her voice. Good morning, sweetheart. You hungry? He nodded and climbed onto his usual stool at the island. Aaliyah served him quietly, listening for footsteps, waiting for Dwayne to wake. But when he finally did enter, hair tousled, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, she saw the stress in his eyes before he said a word. You okay? He asked her, voice low. I need to show you something, she replied. In private. Do his ode. He glanced at Trey, then at Dolores, who gave a tiny nod, confirmation she'd keep the boy occupied. They moved into the study. Aaliyah closed the door behind them and took the flash drive from her pocket. She didn't speak, just inserted it into the desktop computer and clicked on the video. Dwayne watched in silence. First the hallway footage, then the doctored clip implying Aaliyah had snuck into his bedroom. When it ended, he didn't speak for several seconds. Then, finally, she recorded this, he said, flatly.